Hello and welcome to Misaal. My name is Zahed and I'm your host. On this podcast, I talk candidly with the most innovative minds working towards building a better startup economy in Pakistan. In this episode of the Misaal podcast, I invite you to listen in on my conversation with Bilal Sheikh. He's the founder of Lettus Kitchens, a cloud kitchen startup based in Islamabad. He talks about transitioning from scaling operations at Careem to starting his own startup, what kind of problems restaurants face in Pakistan, which his startup is trying to solve for, and his experience fundraising from angels and VC. Let's listen in. Welcome, Bilal, to the Misal podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Zahid.
So, are you based out of Islamabad or where are you based out of?
Islamabad. Yeah.
Okay. So your startup is also based out of Islamabad.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to start by saying congratulations. You recently raised funding, so that's really great. I'd love to learn more about that and how that process was.
Sure.
But before we get there, I would love for you to just give us an overview of your career so far. Like you are ex Careem and then you transitioned to your own startup. So how
Yeah.
was that experience?
So Zahid, I've spent the last 8 years in Qatar. Four of them were spent at
Okay.
Careem. I'm the second employee to be hired when Qatar's operations were starting out. And for me, it was a tremendous journey and a very humbling one as well. I basically started in operations, but eventually grew into a country manager role, and I was overseeing both the ride-hailing and food delivery vertical. So we made Qatar essentially
Okay.
one of the top five markets. I think fast forward 4 years afterwards, this is last summer when the pandemic hit, and obviously things got really bad. It was a moment where I felt that it's a good time to transition out and perhaps move back to Pakistan, explore the ecosystem and an opportunity. So I came back, obviously started looking at different things. Restaurant industry was a particular passion of mine for some time. And when I went in deeper,
Okay.
I found like there was a great place to get started.
Okay, so when you say it was a passion of yours, as in like, did you have like a family involved in
No, I think just exceptionally picky eater. My wife and I used to go out
picky
to,
eater? Okay.
yeah, a lot of dinners, and I saw the amount of gap
Okay.
between restaurants, how they operated back in the Middle East versus how we were operating here in Pakistan, right? I think there was a lot of traditional ways
Okay.
of managing a business. So that and just being very curious about the fact that the restaurant would start at a high in the beginning of the year, and then by the end of it, you would probably see it dying down, right? For multiple reasons. So I
Okay.
really wanted to figure
Yeah.
out like where was the problem, how could we help restaurants, and why haven't we digitized this part of the industry to the extent that's been done in other parts?
Okay. So how did you decide like having like a cloud kitchen concept? Can you just explain like what would a cloud kitchen look like or
Sure.
how does it look like in Pakistan?
The simplest way to think about a cloud kitchen is a restaurant without dine-in, and the kind of benefits that you get by removing dine-in is obviously the front of house. You don't have to rent out very premium locations to get foot traffic and hire a lot of staff. But at the same time, as a cloud kitchen, you could be doing multiple cuisines in the same space. You could try to optimize how you manage your supply chain, how you manage your operations, and you can offer a lot more variety to customers within that same neighborhood that you serve. For me, kind of getting into cloud kitchens came as a result of interviewing a lot of restaurant owners at the beginning of 2021. These were restaurant owners who either, they were at different stages of their business, right? Some had built one or two branches, some of them were very early, some of them were even home chefs looking to venture out into, the cloud kitchen or restaurant space. And three, essential problems that came up almost in every conversation. The first one was talent is very hard to source and retain. In restaurant industry, it probably has the highest amount of turnover. The second one was that you as an individual restaurant do not have too much leverage around supply chain, so you can't get a lot of stability. You don't have a lot of control of prices. Your customers are paying only a certain amount, and they don't care what your cost
Yeah.
input has become, right? They're still going to pay 150 or 200 for a plate of biryani.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the third one was that when you're working with aggregators and they're charging you around 25 to 30%, thinking about growth and thinking about moving beyond into multiple branches and trying to leverage online delivery was becoming a lot, really challenging. And then, there were minor issues here and there about the operations and stuff. So my idea was, hey, there are a lot of restaurants in Pakistan that are promising in terms of their brand, in terms of their product, in terms of their customer and audiences, and they're obviously not well spread out, right? If I ask you right now, what's a national biryani brand that we have, or what's a national Pakistani brand that's in multiple cities across Pakistan, there aren't that many names. And the fundamental thing behind is that scaling a restaurant and scaling a business is a very difficult thing to do. So my idea was, hey, why don't we start a cloud kitchen? See if we can operate on a Kitopi model, and I'll explain a little bit more afterwards. Kitopi is like us being the franchisee for another restaurant. Us saying, hey, I have a kitchen, I have a team, I have resources. Why don't I execute on your menu in my location? And then obviously that gives you another branch in that area.
From so we have been talking about from the restaurant's point of view,
Yeah,
right? Like, so there's a restaurant that wants to expand and it cannot reach, like, further corners of the city.
yeah,
So they would have a, cloud kitchen or ghost kitchen, where you would fulfill the orders as soon as they come in through app
yeah,
or through the food aggregators. So for a restaurant that's already running, that's all well and good. What about like someone who wants to start a business? For example, someone is,
hmm,
working ghar se khana koi paka raha hai,
सही
and
है.
they're delivering it to, different people, like maybe on monthly basis, weekly basis.
Hmm.
Does Lettuce Kitchen, does it have a way for it, like, to target that market too? So in the
Yeah.
sense that they would help out those businesses.
So we try to categorize, the kind of cuisine or food spectrum into two parts. There's hot food and there's, I guess, ready to eat food, right? Hot food is you get an order and
Okay.
you have to prepare it in 10, 15 minutes. Ready to eat would be
Yeah.
obviously by itself. So what we discovered is that, you know, when it comes to home chefs and those who are just looking to branch out, I think they're sort
Yeah.
of at that stage of their business where they haven't necessarily built a brand. Obviously, the small customer base, they're getting repeat orders, and at the same time, they're trying to figure out how to take the next step. Normally, what we do in those situations is if they have a ready-to-eat portfolio, that usually works really well because we could just source that product from them, keep that in our kitchen, and then register their brand onto the aggregator and our application. And what then happens is that they're
Yeah.
obviously now found us as a distribution point for their product, right? It's a unique way of using cloud
Okay.
kitchens that has not been done, I think, so far to our knowledge anywhere else in the world. But we felt like you could use
Okay.
cloud kitchens in that way because you have spare storage, let's say. So we would want to help them out, but what we've often discovered is that hot food is technically challenging. So you want to do that for a brand first and maybe the young entrepreneurs later on in your journey when you have an established network. Because as a startup, you're trying to grow really fast. If it's a very young brand, then obviously taking them to a certain level of quality, of pricing, of managing operations takes a lot of time and effort. And it's better done for a
Right.
restaurant that has their SOPs and these things figured out versus somebody that's very new. So yeah, I think we would want to help them in the future, but if they have a ready-to-eat portfolio, we could jump with them immediately.
So the value proposition for businesses, restaurant businesses, is very clear. Like, you help them expand to markets that they might not be able to reach, given, maybe they don't have enough resources or, the manpower or
Yeah.
the location. But what about the consumer side?
Mhm.
What is the benefit for if I were to order something that, would I know if I'm ordering it from Cloud
Yeah.
Kitchen, or will it just say that, hey, a XYZ restaurant is just delivering it?
True. So Zahid, I think around consumers, this is actually following through the trends of cloud kitchens in the US because they're at a slightly more, not a slightly, but I think a quite more mature stage, right? And
Mhm.
right now, the cloud kitchen industry over there is taking a turn that we're kind of taking right now, funnily enough. So to give you a little bit of
Okay.
context, we were in the B2B cloud kitchen space in terms of supporting restaurants, but we
Yeah.
actually pivoted our business 3 months in. And the pivot actually happened where we decided that, before we jumped towards restaurants, there are multiple reasons why we decided to pivot. Some of those were actually explained in Hotpod and their recent learnings that they were posted, and we'll focus more towards the consumer side. Now, on the consumer side, we saw a massive opportunity. Just a little bit of context before we move into what consumers think about cloud kitchens. Um, the massive opportunity was that 80 to 90% of all brands in Pakistan are actually just concentrated in Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad, right? And uh, the idea is that if everyone is adopting online delivery and aggregators are in the next 30, 40 cities around the country, then what are these people getting, right, in terms of great food options? And we felt like, if you're thinking about Chinese food, you may never get great Chinese food in any of these markets. If you're thinking about, great fast food, you may not get those. So, I mean, Pakistani food is pretty much common in these cities, but the rest of the portfolio is, largely missed. So we felt like, okay, we're in the space of helping out brands, but there is a clear gap on having the brands in the first place that could actually scale, right? So maybe so just in our city in Islamabad, right? There are in fact just 2 to 3 brands which do Chinese food, and they do it at price points that I think are not affordable, right? And my team and I don't agree with how we could scale that, but people love Chinese food. So we did that experiment. We launched our first brand in Islamabad, and it took off like wildfire, right? So there was validation on what we were onto. So now the focus is we want to build these brands, we want to scale them throughout the country in a network of dark kitchens. But in the process, we build out a technology that could potentially help out restaurants in other ways than just being a franchisee. Now, coming back to the consumer side, um, we've kind of seen both. There are some consumers that know what Lettuce Kitchens is doing because we advertise all these brands across our portfolio, and we never hear about concerns that hey, my Chinese food is being made in the same kitchen as Pakistani food. And the reason for that for us has been if you go to a Pakistani restaurant today, you'll see that they have sections which have Pakistani, Chinese, pasta, steak, desserts. It's a general thing in Pakistan, right? You don't think about that. Wait, what are these guys doing with steaks inside a Pakistani kitchen? Everyone is serving at least some portion of that cuisine. So when you're acclimated to that as a consumer, as a cloud kitchen, if I'm doing the same thing, it doesn't really impact that severely. And the other thing important that we're doing is the two kitchens that we have are actually in places where people could do takeaway. So they're actually seeing the operation happen inside the kitchen very visibly, something that's now happening in the United States with the kitchens. So I think that's how we're building kind of consumer confidence in this space. Yeah.
Yeah, so my experience with cloud kitchens is almost nil
Okay.
because so I live in a suburb. I don't live in any city, metropolitan city. So I live in a suburb. So in suburbs, usually like when you open up DoorDash or Uber
Yeah.
Eats, you're looking at restaurants that you have been to before, and like for me, it's for us like my family is not we're not into eating out all the time.
Right.
So whenever we are doing it, it's usually the restaurants that we have seen or been to before.
Right.
It's never something new. So I have never personally experienced like ordering food from cloud kitchen, but it's not something that I would like shy away from. It's something that I always felt that like does the consumer know
Mm,
that they are ordering from a cloud kitchen? So that's something that would be important for me to know that I'm ordering from a cloud kitchen. Okay. Okay. So you mentioned that businesses or restaurants can make food at the location that you provide them and all those things,
yep.
right? So then the issue becomes like the recipes, right? Like some people or some restaurants might have recipes, they do certain things certain way. So does the food quality, the taste stay consistent?
Important context here. We took the Cloud Kitchen B2B model over those 3 months that we ran, right? We're not doing B2B cloud kitchens anymore. So
Yeah.
restaurants are no longer considered as our direct customers. What we did in the first couple of months was, and this question around recipes came up pretty often. We had two ways of solving for that problem. One of the ways we explored and it worked out well, the other way, not so much. The first way was if you obviously have a ready to eat product or even a half done one, then us picking that product up, keeping in our kitchen ensures quality 80, 90%, right? It just means how well we store the product. So to give you an example, we partnered with Masoom's Bakery here in Islamabad, and they're a well-known brand over here. Some of my friends, we celebrated our birthdays with those cakes back when we were in high school, and that brand had shut down. So we reached out to the owner. We said, "Why don't you launch as a virtual concept with us? We revive the brand and we just see how it works." And he is doing now with two branches, $2,500 of sales in just his home, and we're running the whole operation. So the way that it works is we
Okay.
submit an order that here are the cakes that we need for the week. We pick them up, we keep them in our kitchen, and the branding is essentially all of Masoom's with a little bit of Lettuce Kitchens here and there, as in powered by Lettuce Kitchens, so on. So in that case, if it's the vendor that's obviously ensuring quality and sending out a quality product, then we don't have to worry too much. It's just that from time to time, we have to make sure that maybe the vendor might have overlooked a couple of things. So you have to do quality tests and you might take out a slice, share it with the team and see like, is this flavor and the profile exactly where it should be, or is there something missing?
Okay.
That's one.
Okay.
The second way, which is, kind of doing hot food, and that's where things become a little trickier because if somebody tells you a recipe A to Z, then they're obviously worried about their IP, and we have to do execution 100% as they told us, right? So what we try to do is
Yeah.
perhaps, depending on the cuisine, we will try to break down that process and see how much can we do in terms of finishing. So let's take an example of a burger joint. The burger joint is concerned about three elements: the burger bun, the meat, and the sauces, right? The vegetables and stuff are pretty common. So The sauce will be made by the restaurant brand. The meat would be prepared by the restaurant brand, so raw meat in terms of whatever their ratios are. The burger bun could be supplied directly to us. So in our case, what we're doing is just the final finishing process and assembly. We're not doing it from scratch. Therefore, eliminating the idea of how much recipe alteration happens or how much, quality could you really ensure if you're doing it from scratch. So that's, I think, where you could break down the recipe in the sense that you could give the IP power to the restaurant and you only take on the finishing aspect, which you could give out to any franchisee or anyone without really worrying about the IP.
So, I mean, if you're doing so many things for the restaurant,
Mm.
so did I hear you correctly? You said that is the restaurant your customer, or is the customer of the restaurant your customer?
Right. So, first 3 months of our startup, the restaurant was the customer. When we pivoted and moved towards a B2C model where we're now doing our own brands, now obviously it's the end consumer. Yeah,
So the revenue that you're generating is from the customer. So there has to be like certain kind of margin. So those margins usually in the restaurant industry, like in the at least in the US, I'm sure that I don't know how different it is in Pakistan, but in
sure.
the US, there's a very slim margin. Like,
Yeah.
so how does that work out in your situation? Like, are the margins very small? Like, how do you make money, basically?
Great. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. I think when you're in the online food business, it's a very tricky space to be in, especially when you cannot control how much commission you have to pay for the delivery service. But I think there are two ways that we figured out that work really well. The first one is that if you're operating as a cloud kitchen, you can obviously diversify your revenue streams fairly quickly, right? So you could have the same Chinese section doing one or two brands that are very close by. You could also be doing Thai food, which is part of the same section in the business. So all of these different brands address different consumer segments online, which means that you can obviously, if you were maybe getting 20% at the end of everything for one brand, now you're getting 20% across two, three brands, right? So the overall volume and that percentage starts to make sense. The other aspect is that you have to focus on how much portion of your business should be coming from the aggregator versus your direct sources. So normally, if you're a restaurant and if you're doing dine-in, right, then I think you need dine-in to be at least 50 to 60% of your business before you start seeing online food delivery as a great way to build a brand and obviously expand your order volume. If online delivery was doing maybe 80% of your business, then you'd be in a lot of stress and you would obviously feel that this is no longer worth it. So you have to kind of mix and match. If I'm a cloud kitchen today, I have to diversify revenue streams and take advantage of the fact that I could launch multiple cuisines and obviously take a small percentage from each. Or if I'm a dine-in restaurant, then I have to make sure my dine-in is at least doing 40-50% of my orders. The other 40-50% could come from the aggregator, and that pushes my business up.
At the end of the day, it's like a margin game
Yeah,
anyways. So it's like, making sure like how you are optimizing for, delivery through aggregator or like through direct source.
exactly.
What do the numbers look like? I'm pretty sure as a startup, like you're hoping like, numbers are growing every single
Yeah.
month, at least, by a few percentage points. How does that look like for you? Like, what does it look like for the next, 12 months, 18 months? And do you have any plans to raise more money?
So I think in terms of the numbers, we're growing about 10 to 10.5% week on week. This was our growth throughout
Okay.
November, December, and coming into sort of, sorry about that, so coming into January.
Yes.
Um, and so, uh, like these numbers are a result of us, getting the brands right and especially their product market fit, right? So for us, product market
Yeah.
fit is essentially that the food we sell has to be the right quality, the right quantity at the right price, right? And these are three variables that
Right.
you have to play on very well. So when we launched our Chinese brand, for example, it took off. I mean, it started doing 60, 70 orders per day. And the response was insane, right? There are corners of the city that we were not even serving from which customers are calling us and saying, hey, we heard about your Chinese food and we would want to place an order. Can you deliver it? And this is like 10, 12 kilometers away. We'd be telling the customer that, that your food is going to get cold. And they're like, no, 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 don't worry. Just, we love the prices. You guys have to come. And during the
Mhm.
rainy season, there were some zones of the city which we actually shut down, right? We said we cannot serve them. And there are folks in these zones who sent an email to us saying, hey, we work at this company. My friends and I have been ordering from you guys from like several weeks now. We love your food. Can you please reopen the zone? Because we just cannot find anything that's a great alternative. So we felt like, okay, that's a huge validation. And I don't think there's a Chinese brand in Pakistan that may be considering how much of a gap there is for people who love this food but just can't have it that frequently because it's so overpriced. Um, so for us, trying to find these opportunities and obviously scaling the network of kitchens is a great way. But the future that we're looking for, and obviously the funding that we're going to raise for, is something like this. Um, I think you're familiar with the concept of meal subscriptions and meal kits, right? I think they're very popular out of the US,
Yes,
right?
yes. Yeah.
You don't
Yes,
have
yeah.
those models over here, or even if you do, they're in silos, right? So um, I know of this husband and wife duo who wake up 3 o'clock in the morning. They're preparing for meals for 15, 20 clients, and they're doing keto, right? They're doing your macros, they're
Yeah.
measuring your fitness goals, and they're trying to see what works. And up until 7 o'clock in the morning, they'll prepare your entire day's meal and send it out to everyone. And they charge you probably 45,000, 60,000 a month for providing that service. But what I
Mhm.
want to get to is that if you think about meal kits, meal subscriptions, or even healthier eating, there's just no good platform out there to make that happen. And what we realize is that while we're solving for these consumer pain points, let's go deeper and try to solve for these digital food experiences that have just not been digitized. If I'm trying to do office catering, if I'm trying to do online catering, and I want to try and see different options, well, guess what? At Lettus Kitchens, you have the entire spectrum of options because we're doing things in fast food, Chinese, Pakistani, whatever. And then on top of it, we can build that layer which does meal kits, meal subscription, anything else that obviously, people are looking for. So I think there's a great value that we could offer to consumers because of the platform, because of the brands, and because of the kitchens that we're building. So the funding that we're going for is actually going to be a significant round. And the idea is that we want to build both the platform on which we could diversify the experiences for customers and at the same time build out the network of kitchens and brands that are going to power them. In the future, we hope to maybe partner with chefs, maybe introduce different new product lines that we ourselves have had our handfuls, and obviously leverage the talent that exists in Pakistani industry, and sort of become that, curated marketplace, so to speak.
Yeah, so you do plan on raising like further rounds this year
Yeah,
and like coming year. So are you like approaching mostly like local investors? Like how was your fundraising for the all the fundraising you have already done?
sure.
How was that journey? Like how long did it take from the point where you made a pitch deck and to the point where you got funded?
So the angel round at the beginning of 2021, I joined something called Founder Institute. They're a Silicon Valley accelerator program for pre-seed startups. And the essential part was just to try to get the momentum and obviously get my foot in the industry because there was a lot of mentors that were coming up with FI and that could help me, get introductions. During that time period, there was something really important that FI pushed towards, which was building an audience list of people that we thought could potentially invest in the company and sending them at least, if not every week, then once a month update about where your startup is, right? And I started just building that audience list. So for the the program was for 4 months. I spent at least 2 months trying to just build up that audience, right? This was sending a once a month update that, hey, I've now found a kitchen space. Hey, I've now just found the lease. Hey, I've now, recruited my first person. And that was sort of to build a little bit of momentum and interest to the point where I would actually require funding and I would want them to jump in, right? So I think that as an exercise is really great if you're trying to do any kind of fundraising, right? It's very hard for you to just go out and immediately start expecting to, get yeses from all the VCs that you're reaching out because you're so awesome, right? They require a bit of context. They want you to be in their market. And obviously talk to other VCs in the space. In the angel round, my aim was to raise $175,000. That was just to maybe open up 2 to 3 kitchens, stick around to Islamabad and Rawalpindi, and obviously just build out the initial founding team to get things rolling. What I eventually found out that uh, because of how I had carried on these things, the same pool of investors were talking to people in their circles as well. And so when I kind of jumped in and said, "Hey, now I'm looking for funding," there was a lot of interest that started coming in. Right, the first 1 or 2 months were extremely challenging because uh, a lot of the investors were also new to safe fundraising. That's the mode that I used. Safe is a way that you get
Okay.
equity financing against a certain amount of money, and then that equity converts into future
Yeah.
rounds, right? Um, So for those investors, I had to walk them through, this is how equity financing happens, this is how safe happens, this is how valuations happen, and I think this is a great time for you to come in because you'd get a huge discount when we do price rounds in the future. So for them, they're these mentors of mine, friends, family, professionals that I've worked with, ex-Careemers, all of these individuals that I've been keeping up to date, and for them, this was a great, exciting opportunity. So they jumped in, they eventually, uh, helped me raise 175. But then when they had invested, they then brought a couple of people that they knew even more from their circle, and I managed to raise another $75,000 just from those conversations. So for me, that was hugely learning. There's some investors that I just did a complete cold reach out to on LinkedIn. One of them actually became our advisor as well. His name is Kash Rahman. He is working out of,
Yeah.
he's based out of Washington as a president CEO of a food service contracting company, two-time startup founder, great profile. Um,
Okay.
so that was the first part of the process. Now we're kind of scaling up and we're looking to obviously raise a larger round. So the approach is again similar. I have to start getting warm intros to VCs. So your existing network of angel investors are a huge help. And at the same time, you're trying
Yeah.
to give that momentum that, hey, we're continuing to grow. We're obviously getting a lot of interest. We are talking to several VCs. So if you kind of time bound the whole exercise in fundraising, you can obviously get a lot better results. And you don't want to stretch out this process for too long because then, as a founder, your mind is also occupied very deeply in fundraising overall. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything specific you'd like to know about the fundraising process, but
This is great. Now that thanks for sharing that and being transparent because it's very difficult to get people to talk about these
yeah,
things. So that's really great. It's very refreshing
thank,
for you to like talk about these things.
thank you.
So the entire time you have been talking, I'm thinking like, okay, you have like orders coming in, you are doing deliveries. Like, what does your team look like? Like, how many
Sure.
people have you hired so far? Like, I know you're a solo founder,
Yeah.
so how do you manage all these things?
Zahid, I think managing all of this, it boils down to having an awesome team. And I was extremely lucky. The first two people that joined the team have been sort of foundational to this startup, right? The first one was
Yeah.
Khizr. He was the founder of a startup out of Karachi called K-Town. Um, and they were expanding rapidly throughout the country. They were in the hospitality space, refurbishing and doing something similar to what Rumi and the rest of them are doing, right? But unfortunately, when the pandemic came, hospitality was hit severely. He had to shut down the startup. And
Yeah.
but the kind of entrepreneur he is, he immediately jumped into cloud kitchens, launched two of his brands. One of them he brought here to Islamabad. And during that time, we just got to
Yeah.
talk and we saw a great opportunity to work together. So he's been fantastic. And he looks after
Yeah.
sales and product. So product in this case is the food and ensuring the right portfolio goes out to the customer. So very entrenched into इसमें गरम मसाला कितना गया है and इसमें नमक कितना गया है,
Okay.
standardizing the whole thing. The second individual is
Okay.
Tayyab. Tayyab was actually running his own pizza restaurant out of Rawalpindi for 2 years with his cousin. Prior to that, a GM for a restaurant chain based out of Pakistan as well. Sorry, based out of Turkey, but over here expanding into Pakistan. So a numbers guy, deep
Yeah.
into finance, understands the kitchen operations really well. You could put him in front of a baking oven and he could make you pizzas that are, unlike any other. Um, so the idea of him having him on the team was he understood the business really well. So from day one, really well
Okay.
managing finances, and obviously Kizit managing, portfolio and other parts, and I was looking after operations to a large degree. So the three of us obviously built it from the ground up, and we got our hands dirty as much as possible. But now we have a team of about 12 people. We're expanding our operations into Lahore as well. We just signed a really exciting partnership with Collabs, the largest and fastest growing probably co-working facility in Pakistan. So at
Yeah, I've been trying to get Omar to come on the
okay.
podcast. So eventually he'll come and I'll send him this podcast, be like, please come and talk to me. We have been trying to coordinate for a long
Sure,
time.
sure.
And yeah, I've heard like really good things about him and I really want to talk to him. So yeah,
Yeah,
collabs, I think they're doing great work too.
wonderful,
So
wonderful.
so that's great.
Yeah,
That's
no,
great.
I
Yeah,
met
yeah,
Omar,
yeah.
and I think their focus was a lot more on community building, which was fantastic. Just trying to connect a lot of
Yeah.
entrepreneurs to value-added people. So yeah, I think with collabs with Lahore, teams now 12 people. We recently onboarded Noman, who's our head of brand and marketing. Wonderful guy. Worked at head of marketing at Cinnabon, previously in Dubai and London with a couple of brands. So he's super, entrenched into product and obviously getting it out to the customers in the right way and talking to customers at 12 or 1 o'clock in the night when their order is getting late and he's trying to respond to those calls and making sure that everything works out for them. So yeah, I think all in all,
Okay.
fantastic team. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a great team going. And so one question I have for you is like I always want to know, like, what would you say is your superpower? Like what is it that you
Mhm.
to bring to the table that makes your startup stand out from like other competitors or other startups
Yeah.
that have tried the same thing in the past and failed?
Sure. I sincerely think that our superpower is actually being obsessed with food quality, right? For a lot of
Okay.
startups and for a lot of maybe even restaurant owners, the process of R&D is probably done on day one. And then after that, if the restaurant has been receiving complaints or negative feedback or if the product is not working, then at that point, I'm not sure how deeply entrenched the same management or the same team is in trying to get that product to its level where it used to be, right? For our case, Tayyab, myself, Khizr, even Noman, we don't let a product reach out to the customer until we're all satisfied. We've had it tested. We know that this is exactly the recipe that we need to get out of it, right? So we're focusing on a lot of details. Funny enough, 2 days ago we did a tasting with a chef that was coming on trial, and we have this little fun matrix that we acronym, and it's called FAT. It essentially stands for
Okay.
flavor, aroma, and texture. Um, and the idea is that every time, there's 6, 7 dishes in front of us, we have to give zero facial expressions. We cannot give feedback. We'll just quietly put a number under each of these three things. And the number is between 1 to 5, but we cannot give a three. Something I learned from FI, right? So three means that you're average and you're not sure. You have to decide, was that a two or
Yeah.
was that a four? Um, so
Okay.
we run that process, quite obsessively, and the idea is that we then ensure that the chef is kind of getting feedback on a day-to-day basis on where things are going wrong. Like we'd be walking by the
Okay.
kitchen and we try to notice like, what's happening with the shawarma? Why does that look a little bit browner than it used to be? Or and we're very, very particular about. So if there are four people all tied together with an obsession towards product, then I think there is a lot more value that we can add. And this is not something that's easy to get into. Like, you need a right chef, you need the right team, and you need all of us to love food so much that you'd be willing to give your time and nights to get it approved to a level where customers, when they eat it, they're like, bang on, this is exactly what we were looking
Sounds like you probably work like more than 15, 20 hours a day or something.
for. Yeah.
Is that what you're
Sort
doing?
of like last night we finished at 10:30 because we were testing out shawarmas and seeing, dude, the shawarma that people love needs to have a sauce dripping out of it. This is not enough, sauce. So we had like four iterations of that, and by the time we were done, it was already 10 or 11. So yeah, fun time. We have a simple philosophy at the Lettus Kitchen, and it's called that we don't have an MVP when it comes to food, right? So normally every startup they go out to the market with a half-baked product and they're like, try it out, give us feedback and let us know. But in the case of food, you just cannot take that risk because for us as consumers,
Yeah.
we never give a place with bad food a second chance, right? Never. Like, doesn't matter
Yeah.
if we try just one aspect of the menu. If we did not get good soup, we would probably never try the mains in the future, despite what feedback we get. So we don't want to risk this part. That's why the obsession around quality is you want to get that across the first time and you want to get it right. And you want to make sure that it's so right that they're telling their friends, their family, they're posting on Facebook, and they're obviously, coming back to order once more.
Before I let you go, I always ask my guests like
Sure.
if there's a book they would recommend that they're currently reading, or the book they've really enjoyed reading, or a
So I think one of the really great books that I've read, Ben Horowitz, it's What You Do Is Who You Are. And I hope I
great.
got the name right because I haven't gone back to it in a very long time. But the reason that is one hell of a read is because you're reading about leadership, culture, and building an institution from from reading about history of people that you never thought you'd be studying, right? So there's a guy who was on a death row in a prison and he was trying to figure out how to survive and he built this entire organization inside prison and the culture that he built in order to get people on the right track. They study on Genghis Khan and exactly how did he build his empire and what kind of leadership principles did he go through. So very unconventional figures. You would be expecting,
Yeah.
people that you've already heard of, like Jeff Bezos and so on, but Ben Horowitz does an exceptionally good job at trying to figure out what really builds culture and being very direct about it. There's no fluff. It's a very, simple, straightforward book, and I've absolutely enjoyed reading it. So would definitely recommend for anyone even building your startup. There's a different angle to culture building that we've read about, and I think this book definitely is a fresher. Sorry, the other one was around the podcast, right?
Yeah.
I think Masters of Scale has been one of my favorites by Reid Hoffman. I
Okay.
think that for a
Yeah.
lot of entrepreneurs, that's a famous or a popular podcast, but for me, kind of getting into entrepreneurship, I think it brought on a lot of right elements that I was looking for. So great podcast as
Yeah, I mean, I have too many podcasts
well.
that I could recommend, but yeah, I mean, All In is my favorite.
Okay,
Like right now, like I love listening to it. All In and Pivot.
awesome.
And as far as books go, I actually have read The Hard Things About Hard
Yes,
Things. That's
that was
also by Ben Horowitz. Yeah,
that's where it's from.
yeah. So that was his first book. So I've read that book, but I didn't read the second one. So I'll definitely give it a shot. See if I think I have like this subscription for audiobooks.
Awesome.
I'll see if it's there, and I'll definitely give a listen.
Sure.
So cool, cool, cool. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you for being on the Misaal podcast. Best of luck with the fundraise and with everything else. Would love to have you again sometime in the future.
Thank you. Zahir, it was really nice
Yeah.
talking about lettuce, and obviously, thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Misaal podcast. I hope you enjoyed the podcast and will thank me by writing a review or sharing it on social media. Make sure you follow and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Thanks again. See you soon.